What if the secret to your strength and purpose lies in a simple connection? Follow the disciples as they discover the profound truth behind Jesus' teachings about the vine, and uncover the life-changing lesson that will leave you filled with peace and hope. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden light over the rugged hills of Judea. The disciples walked in a contemplative silence, their steps heavy with the weight of unspoken thoughts. They had been traveling for days, following Jesus as he taught them lessons of love, faith, and service. Yet, despite the long journey, each disciple carried their own burdens they couldn't share with one another, even within the group. When they reached the vineyard, Peter's voice broke the silence. "This vineyard, Jesus, it's so full of life. The vines are thick and the grapes are heavy with fruit. But I wonder, will they last?" He stared out at the rows of vines, their leaves swaying gently in the breeze. Despite the beauty around them, Peter's heart was troubled, unsure if their journey would lead to something lasting. Jesus paused, letting the weight of Peter's question settle in the air for a moment. His eyes looked over the vineyard and a soft smile appeared on his face. "Peter," he said gently, "just as these vines are nourished by the soil, you too must remain nourished by the source of your life." Jesus gestured to the thriving plants around them. "When you are rooted deeply in the Father, nothing can shake you. No matter how storms may come, you will stand firm." Peter furrowed his brow, unsure of what Jesus truly meant, but he said nothing more. The silence returned, heavier now, as the disciples continued their journey deeper into the vineyard. The walk through the vineyard continued, but the weight of Jesus' words lingered in the air. After a while, Jesus turned to his disciples, his face serene and calm as always. He gestured to a nearby vine that grew thick and tall, with lush green leaves and ripened grapes hanging from every branch. The grapes glistened under the sun's warm rays, their deep purple hue almost as if they had absorbed the light itself. "Let me tell you a story," Jesus began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "There was once a vine keeper who planted a vineyard in a fertile valley. The soil was rich and the sun was always warm. Every vine in the vineyard was given the same attention, each receiving the nourishment it needed to grow strong. But there was one vine that, despite all efforts, began to wither. It grew weaker and weaker, refusing to stretch toward the sun. The vine keeper saw this and decided to prune it. He carefully removed the old, withered branches, tending to it with patience and love. Slowly, that vine began to grow again, its leaves reaching for the sun, its grapes ripening on the vine." Jesus paused, letting the parable sink into the hearts of his disciples. "This vine," he continued, "is like your soul. You cannot grow without connection. Just as the vine cannot thrive without the soil and the sun, you cannot bear fruit without staying connected to your Father in heaven." The disciples, though they had heard parables before, felt a deeper resonance in this one. It was as if Jesus had peeled back another layer of truth, revealing something more profound than they had known before. As the disciples continued walking through the vineyard, a heaviness settled over Peter. The words Jesus had spoken echoed in his mind, but his heart was filled with doubt. He had followed Jesus for so long, yet often found himself questioning his own worthiness. Could he truly remain connected to the Father when his own heart felt weak? Could he endure the trials ahead? His doubts were like gnawing weights, pulling him deeper into uncertainty. Unable to hold it in any longer, Peter stopped and turned to Jesus, his voice shaky but determined. "Lord, what if we falter? What if we feel too weak to hold on, to stay connected? How can we return to the source when we feel lost, when we feel like we've failed?" His heart pounded in his chest as he waited for Jesus' response, his fear of failure holding him captive. Jesus looked at Peter with love, his gaze steady and filled with understanding. He placed a hand on Peter's shoulder, offering a reassuring touch. "Peter, even when you feel weak, the Father is with you. He will never abandon you. Just as the vine keeper does not abandon the vine, the Father will not abandon you. You must trust in the pruning, trust that, like the vine, there is always a way back to the source of your strength." "You are not alone, Peter. Remember that." Peter's heart ached with a mixture of hope and shame. He nodded, but his mind was still clouded with doubts. He wanted to believe, but the weight of his own imperfection made it difficult. As the disciples walked on, John, who had always been the quiet one among them, seemed withdrawn. His usual calm demeanor was absent, replaced by a quiet sadness that lingered in his eyes. He had always prided himself on his connection to Jesus, but deep inside, John struggled with feelings of isolation. No matter how close he became to Jesus, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was always on the outskirts, watching others draw nearer while he remained apart. Jesus noticed John's silence and without a word walked beside him. After a few moments he spoke softly. "John, why do you seem so distant today?" John looked at Jesus, his eyes clouded with unshed emotions. I often feel alone, Lord," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I see the others with their strong faith, their deep connection to you. But I wonder, am I truly a part of this? Am I as valuable as the others? Sometimes I feel like I don't belong." Jesus stopped walking and placed his hand gently on John's shoulder. "John, my beloved, you are never alone. You are part of this vineyard, part of something much greater than you realize. Even when you feel isolated, know that the Father is with you. Just as the vine does not question its place in the vineyard, neither should you question your place with me. I have called you and I am with you always." John's heart swelled with a deep, quiet joy. In that moment, he realized that his feelings of loneliness were not a reflection of reality but of his own fears and insecurities. He was part of something beautiful, and Jesus had reminded him of that truth. As they continued their journey through the vineyard, Thomas lagged behind, his brow furrowed in thought. He had always struggled with doubts, unable to accept things at face value. For every miracle Jesus performed, Thomas needed to understand the how and the why, and the answers were often elusive. He had always questioned his own faith, never truly certain that he could accept things without proof. "Jesus," Thomas called out, his voice uncertain. "I need to understand. How can we truly stay connected to the Father when there's so much we don't understand? How can we trust in something we cannot see?" He looked to Jesus, searching his face for answers. Jesus stopped and turned to face Thomas, his expression full of understanding. "Thomas, it is not always about understanding everything. It is about trust. The vine does not question the soil or the sun. It simply grows because it trusts that its source will provide what it needs. Faith is not about understanding every detail. It is about trusting that the source of life is greater than our doubts." Thomas took a deep breath, the weight of Jesus' words slowly sinking in. His mind was still restless, but the assurance in Jesus' voice gave him a sense of peace. Maybe, just maybe, trust was the key to true connection. As they walked further into the vineyard, the disciples came upon a vine that was being pruned by a gardener. The vine was healthy, but the gardener, with careful hands, removed the older, less fruitful branches. The vine trembled slightly under the pruning, but it was evident that the gardener knew what he was doing. He was shaping the vine, making it stronger and more capable of producing better fruit. Jesus pointed to the vine and spoke, his voice calm yet firm. "This is how the Father works in your life. Sometimes he must prune away the parts of you that do not serve your growth. It may feel painful, but know that it is for your good. Just as the vine cannot grow stronger without pruning, you too cannot grow without being refined." Peter watched the gardener's careful work, a fear creeping into his heart. "Lord," he asked hesitantly, "will we always be pruned?" Jesus turned to Peter, his expression kind but knowing. "Yes, Peter. But understand this, the pruning is not a punishment. It is a blessing. It allows you to grow in ways you could never have imagined. And though it may be painful, the fruit that comes from it will bring joy to the Father, and to you as well." By now the disciples had spent hours in the vineyard, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Yet, the more they heard Jesus' words, the more they began to understand their deeper meaning. John's heart felt lighter, Peter's doubt began to fade, and Thomas was slowly accepting that trust, not understanding, was the key to faith. Jesus gathered them together once more, his voice gentle yet powerful. "Remember, my friends," he said, "the key to bearing fruit is staying connected. No matter what storms come, no matter how difficult the journey, remain rooted in love, in faith, and in the Father. For apart from the vine you can do nothing. But with the vine, you will bear fruit beyond measure." The disciples stood in awe, a deep sense of peace washing over them. The truth of Jesus' words was clearer now. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they knew they would endure, because they had a source that was stronger than their doubts, fears, and weaknesses. As they neared the end of the vineyard, the sky began to darken. The disciples could sense that their time with Jesus in this place was drawing to a close. And yet, despite the peace that had settled in their hearts, a question remained. Would they truly be able to stay connected when the trials of life came crashing down? "Lord," Peter asked one final time, "what should we do when we feel like we're losing our connection? When the storms are too strong and we're too weak to hold on?" Jesus looked at each of them, his gaze piercing yet full of love. "When you feel lost, when you feel weak, come back to the vine. Seek the Father, for he is always waiting for you. And know this, no matter what, I will always be with you, guiding you through the storms." As the disciples stood together in the twilight of the vineyard, Jesus' final words filled the air. "I am the vine and you are the branches. Remain in me and I will remain in you. Just as the vine cannot bear fruit without the branches, neither can you bear fruit without me. Apart from me you can do nothing. But in me you will find everything you need." The disciples, standing together, felt an overwhelming sense of peace. They were connected to the vine, to Jesus, and to the Father. No matter what would come, they knew they were never truly alone. As Jesus finished speaking, he looked at his disciples one last time, his eyes filled with love and understanding. "Go now," he said softly, "and bear fruit. Let the love and peace you have found here in this vineyard flow through you to others. Remember, you are never alone. You are always connected, as long as you remain in the vine." The disciples, filled with a deep sense of joy and purpose, turned toward their future, ready to face whatever came, knowing they had a strength far beyond their own. Their connection to Jesus, to the Father, and to each other would be the source of their strength, their peace, and their purpose. And so, their journey continued, not just as followers but as branches of the vine ready to bear fruit for the world. This is end of the story. Comment amen if you believe in Jesus' blessings. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.